What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel, welcome to Simply Car Things. If my voice sounds slightly off, just know that I've been sick the past couple of days and I'm finally getting over this really annoying cold that I've had, so just bear with me on that aspect. Today I would like to delve into a topic that many of my viewers have requested on this channel, which is the BMW S58 engine. This is the next generation of BMW M engines and it shows a very promising sign for the future of BMW M and what is going to be in a lot of the new M cars. So without further ado, let's delve into some of the awesome details about the S58 B30 T0. With the introduction of the Toyota Supra last year in 2019, the BMW B58 engine received a lot of hype in the car community as well as the tuning world because of its absolute legendary presence in the Toyota Supra as well as its endless tuning capabilities and really well put design. Now, what if somebody were to tell you that BMW took the B58 and basically made a high performance version or variant of that engine specifically for M cars only? That's exactly what they've done in this case, and that is the S58 B30 T0. They've essentially improved upon the B58 and made an even more high performance version of that engine. Now, to compare the B58 and the S58 and say that the S58 is anything similar to the B58 is somewhat insane. The S58 is pretty much different on every single level in comparison to the B58, but their nomenclature and naming comes from the same modular platform and family, so that's kind of why they share that, but pretty much everything else is different on this engine. The S58 B30 T0 is 3 liters in displacement and it is an inline 6. That's about where the similarities stop. To start, for the S58, BMW increased the bore, which means that the diameter of the cylinders themselves has actually increased and the stroke was decreased. What the stroke is essentially the travel distance of the piston moving from the bottom of the cylinder to the top. What this should enable in theory is a much freer revving and slightly higher revving engine in comparison to something like the B58. And this is shown with the redline differences of both engines, the S58 having a 7,200 RPM redline versus a 7,000 RPM redline. Big difference, right? On top of that, BMW has also reinforced the S58 engine in a number of ways. For one, it is a closed deck motor, meaning that the cylinder walls are reinforced. There isn't any open cooling jackets around the cylinder walls themselves, and this allows for a much higher degree of strength of the engine block itself. The crankshaft is forged on the engine, the pistons are forged as well, the connecting rods are forged, and so overall we can begin to see that this is a very, very strong engine in terms of its design and structure. Next up, the S58 uses a twin-turbo setup. Now, these turbos in the twin-turbo setup are mono-scroll units, they are not twin-scroll units, even though very confusingly BMW refers to this as twin power turbo, which they also use twin power turbo for their single twin scroll turbochargers. So it's very confusing and I don't know why BMW has chosen to use this name. No one really likes it and it really just confuses the hell out of everybody that tries to understand these cars. But nevertheless, it's a twin turbo setup. The S58 also features dual high pressure fuel pumps, which can inject fuel extremely precisely and at a pressure of around 350 bar. That's actually a little over 5,000 PSI. So very, very high pressure fuel system. And this in conjunction with the larger valves that the S58 uses in comparison to something like the B58 should enable a greater amount of airflow coming into the engine as well as fuel, and that mixture is going to be very precise as well. For the cooling system, we also see a lot in the way of cooling and durability. The S58 features 2 liquid-fed intercoolers that have coolant flowing through them, and these are also integrated within the intake itself. BMW refers to this as an indirect intercooling system, which is somewhat vague on what they mean by that, but essentially I believe they're just talking about the fact that the intercoolers are not integrated in the middle of the intake tract like how it is on the B58 engine. Nevertheless, they are integrated within the intake itself. The oil supply system of the S58 is also quite advanced for a normal production vehicle. It features 1 main oil pump as well as 2 secondary oil pumps with multiple chambers for the oil to collect within the sump itself, so it could be considered a dry sump system. I'm not sure if this is technically defined as a dry sump system. BMW isn't clear on that as well, but regardless, it should be sufficient for pretty much any type of straight line and lateral type acceleration runs for track use and canyon driving, there should not be any issues with oil starvation within the S58 engine. And finally, one of the last really cool elements about the S58 that BMW has shared with us is the way that the cylinder head is manufactured. They actually use a 3D printing additive process to basically create these really interesting geometric shapes that a conventional casting process would not be able to create. Now, if you guys are at all familiar with additive technologies, GE actually partnered with HRE Wheels last year to build some really cool, unique concept style geometric additive wheels that have these incredibly intricate designs, and the possibilities with additive technologies and 3D printing are basically endless. And it's really cool because you can save a lot of weight and design many products in a way that are highly unconventional and create geometric figures that are normally impossible to create with a conventional casting method. So this is really cool to see. I don't know the extent into which BMW has integrated this within the cylinder head, but the fact that they are sharing that with us and innovating in that way just is really cool to see. Now, two things I'm sure you guys are wondering about. Does this engine have the dreaded crank hub failure? And second, how does it sound? Does it sound like garbage like the S55 that came before it? Well, according to what I've been reading on the forums and digging through the internet, what I have been able to find is that no, the S58 will not be suffering from a crank hub issue. That has ended with the S55 engine, and the B58 actually has a redesigned crankshaft, and the crank hub that sits on the end of it is actually keyed now. So hopefully that issue should be done and just nothing but a thing of the past. So that is very good news to hear about. The S58 is already in production and being used in cars like the X3M, the X3M Competition, and the X4M and its competition variant as well. It sounds good, but I wouldn't say it sounds great. It definitely has a lot of that rasp that's reminiscent of something like the S55 engine. However, I think it's not as raspy as something like the S55. But nevertheless, I don't think it's a particularly inspiring soundtrack that this engine has, and I just think that's something we have to come to understand with the design of these BMW inline 6 twin turbo engines. They just don't sound as good, and I think part of that just has to do with the turbo setup, and maybe the exhaust manifolds or something in that nature affects the sound. And unfortunately, that's just one of the few drawbacks, I guess you could say, that we would have to deal with. Fortunately, it's nothing bad by any means. What about tuning potential on the S58? So far, it is extremely promising. If you're somebody that likes to make a lot of power with an engine, the S58 is definitely going to please. In the competition variant, in its stock form, it makes 503 horsepower, and chances are that figure is highly underrated. I think many independent dyno testers have dynoed like X3M competitions and have already found well into the 490 wheel horsepower range. So we know that those figures are very conservative. And on top of that, with just simple reflashes and tunes, we can see very high power numbers being squeezed out of this motor. I know pro tuning freaks in boot mode, they're already beta testing their S58 tunes and flashes. And in their beta test for the X3M, they were able to get that 4,000 pound plus SUV to 0 to 60 in 2.9 seconds, which is just absurd to think about. I've seen videos of X4Ms with literally just a JB4 walking Charger and Challenger Hellcats in a straight line. And the next generation BMW M3 and the M4, the G80 and G82, will be using the S58. And it's also confirmed that those cars will have an optional BMW M xDrive or all-wheel drive system. So in terms of straight line performance, these cars are just going to be absurdly quick. They're going to be able to compete, if not decimate, a lot of modern supercars in today's world. And I think it's just crazy. You know, these engines are just getting so powerful and so easy to squeeze high horsepower and torque figures. It's It's really absurd, honestly, how fast cars are getting. So I hope that sheds some light on the S58. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are on this engine in the comment section down below. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, as well as subscribe to the channel down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next one. Take it easy, guys.